Good afternoon, fellow members of my declassified Caribbean news and commentary channel. Thank you so much for joining. Now, today we are going to be looking at another interesting topic, Cuba and Venezuela, the hidden cost of defying great powers. Now, we are seeing that Cuba is about to be invaded by the United States, and it seems to me that the United States is bent on invading this time. This is not just a hit and try. They're going to strike. And we can see that the USS Nimitz is heading to Jamaica, will be in Jamaica tomorrow from June 1 to June 5th. And I understand that a top official of the Trump administration, the military industrial complex, will also be in the Dominican Republic. I forgot his name, and forgive me for not mentioning his name, but the Dominican papers are reporting that he's scheduled to be in the DR on Friday. So I think that we can suggest that maybe on the 6th or afterwards, Cuba will be invaded, or its former president Raul Castro and perhaps the reigning president now will be kidnapped or will be sacked from power. So let's pray for the island of Cuba. Have Cuba and Venezuela fallen into a sovereignty trap? And what lessons should the Caribbean learn from their experiences? And we can talk about the same thing for Haiti as well, because that is the blueprint. Whatever is happening in Haiti is what is the blueprint for all of the other countries. And I want to give a shout out to Superman Bro that has been joining our live, and he has been educating rather a lot of our listening and viewing audiences of what the United States has done to the Republic of Haiti. In this discussion, we examine how foreign powers, economic dependency, sanctions, debt, energy politics, and geopolitical rivalries can shape the decision-making of small and developing nations. Using Cuba and Venezuela as case studies, we explore whether true sovereignty is possible in a world dominated by powerful states, multinational corporations, and competing global interests. What does sovereignty really mean? Can Caribbean nations maintain independence while relying on foreign investment, aid, loans, and trade agreements? And are Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, Guyana, Barbados, Haiti, and other Caribbean states facing similar pressures? Join the conversation as we explore one of the most important political and economic questions facing the region today. And this is something very important, so I hope that you will stay attuned. What does it mean to be sovereign? And many of us are using that word lightly as if we know what it means. Most people would say sovereignty means independence. It means making your own decisions, controlling your own resources, and determining your own future without outside interference. What if sovereignty is more complicated than that? Because we know that that's not weird what we're doing in our respective Caribbean islands, that we don't have the autonomy that we so yearn for. What if a country can have a flag, a national anthem, a seat at the United Nations, and still find itself unable to act freely? Today, we are examining two countries that have become symbols of resistance, controversy, and geopolitical struggle, Cuba and Venezuela. For decades, both nations have presented themselves as defenders of national independence against foreign domination. Yet critics argue that both countries have become deeply dependent on external powers, foreign financing, strategic alliances, and geopolitical patrons. Have Cuba and Venezuela escaped foreign control, or have they merely exchanged one form of dependency for another? This is a very critical question. And more importantly, what lessons should Jamaica, Guyana, Trinidad and Tobago, Grenada, Barbados, Haiti, et al., and the wider Caribbean learn from their experiences? This is the story of the sovereign trap. The 20th century was an era of liberation movements across Africa, Asia, Latin America, and the Caribbean. People fought to and They fought to end, rather, colonial rule and foreign domination. In Cuba, the 1959 revolution promised genuine independence from outside control. Fidel Castro and his supporters argued that Cuba would no longer serve foreign interests. In Venezuela, the Bolivarian, I should say, revolution led by Hugo Chavez promised a similar transformation. Chavez argued that Venezuela's oil wealth should benefit Venezuelans rather than foreign corporations and domestic elites. The message was powerful: national dignity, national control, national sovereignty. Millions supported these projects because they believed their countries could finally chart their own course. But history would prove far more complicated. Small and medium-sized countries rarely operate in a vacuum. Powerful nations compete for influence. Trade routes matter, natural resources matter, strategic locations matter, and both Cuba and Venezuela occupy positions of enormous geopolitical significance. For more than 60 years, Cuba has faced economic pressure, sanctions, diplomatic isolation, and persistent tension with the United States. To survive, Havana increasingly relied on external partners. First, the Soviet Union, then Venezuela, later Russia, China, and other international allies. Meanwhile, Venezuela became heavily dependent on oil exports and global energy markets. When oil prices were high, the government could finance ambitious social programs and regional initiatives. When prices collapsed, vulnerabilities emerged. At the same time, sanctions, political conflict, and economic instability intensified the country's challenges. The result was a difficult reality. Neither country could fully escape the influence of larger global powers. This brings us to the central question: what is the sovereignty trap? The sovereignty trap occurs when a nation seeks independence from one source of influence but becomes dependent on another. A country may reject one empire only to rely heavily on a different power. It may nationalize resources but still depend on foreign technology. It may reject international institutions but require foreign investment. It may celebrate political independence while remaining economically vulnerable or economically dependent, which is an oxymoron. This is not unique to Cuba or Venezuela. History is filled with examples. The challenge facing many developing countries is that sovereignty requires more than political declarations. It requires economic resilience, food security, energy security, industrial capacity, financial stability, and the ability to withstand external pressure. Without these foundations, political independence can become fragile. And I want you to go back to my channel and watch the live that we had last Friday. Is the Caribbean sovereign? Are we sovereign states? And the answer was emphatically no, we are not. Now, let's turn to the Caribbean. Many Caribbean nations proudly celebrate independence. But how independent are our economies? How much of our food is imported? How much of our energy is imported? How dependent are we on tourism, on remittances, on foreign loans, on multinational corporations, on international financial institutions? These are uncomfortable questions and uncomfortable truths. Yet they are necessary questions and truths because sovereignty is not simply about who governs. It is also about who influences, who finances, who owns, who profits, and who ultimately holds leverage. The Caribbean's challenge is not merely political independence. The challenge is creating economies capable of supporting genuine autonomy. Consider Jamaica. For decades, debates have centered around debt, economic reform, foreign investment, and development. Consider Guyana. The country now possesses enormous oil wealth, yet a critical question remains. Will that wealth strengthen national sovereignty or increase dependence on external actors? Consider Trinidad and Tobago, an energy-producing nation navigating an increasingly complex global economy. Each country faces different circumstances, yet all confront a common challenge. How do you engage with powerful international forces without surrendering control of your future? That is the defining question of the 21st century Caribbean. The lesson of Cuba and Venezuela is not that sovereignty is impossible, nor is it that independence movements were meaningless. The lesson is that sovereignty is far more difficult to achieve than many people imagine, and it is a process. It is not just something that was gained in 1962 or whenever you got your independence. It is an evolutionary process. And many people do not like to hear that. Okay? You want to be concerned about what is happening in your parliament when you are not even independent. Whatever is happening in your parliament is just for show, right? It's not there to change the direction of the nation, but you can if you understand the environment in which we are operating. A flag alone does not guarantee independence. An election alone does not guarantee independence. Even ownership of natural resources does not automatically guarantee independence. True sovereignty requires economic strength, institutional capacity, national unity, and the ability to navigate a world dominated by powerful states and powerful interests. The experiences of Cuba and Venezuela remind us, and Haiti as well. We have to include Haiti. So the experiences of Cuba, Venezuela, and Haiti, and among other countries, but these are the primary countries that we should be studying in the Caribbean if you want to understand what is happening in the geopolitical realm. Remind us that the struggle for sovereignty does not end when a nation becomes independent. In many ways, that is when the struggle truly begins. It doesn't end there. And many of us, every year, we are following trucks and we're having our galas and think that we are truly independent when what we're celebrating is really slavery. That every year we are being enslaved more and more as we have not yet gained economic independence. And for the Caribbean, that lesson may be more relevant today than ever before. If you enjoyed this discussion, subscribe, share the video, and let us know in the comments, can any Caribbean nation be truly sovereign in today's global system, or are all countries caught in some version of the sovereignty trap? This is the underlying question that we need to reflect on. Thank you so much for joining. This is the Thinking Channel, where thinking is what we do and how we breathe, what we say. We have to think, and many of us, the school system is no longer designed to train minds to think, but just to adapt to a work environment. Thank you so much for joining. I hope that you'd like and you share with as many people on the platform, or as many of your family members and your friends and your colleagues, so that we can get these discussions out and people can be enlightened, illuminated, as it were. Thank you so much for joining. Adios.